Places of origination and the characteristics of the Arabic letters. The Makhaarij and the Sifaat of the Arabic letters. The correct pronunciation of each of the Arabic letters comes from perfecting two things. One is the Makhaarij of the letter, which is the point of origination of the letter, i.e. which organs and which place in the mouth the letter comes from. And the second one is the correct Sifaat, and this is the characteristics of the letter. And the characteristics of the letters come in very important if you have more than one letter with the same point of articulation or origination, because they have to be separated then by their characteristics. So in order to have the correct pronunciation, these two go hand in hand. So we're going to go through the entire Arabic alphabet, and we're going to look at their points of origination and their characteristics, and we'll identify the differences between the letters in each group of letters. So we are going to group the letters up according to generally where they originate from. So the first thing we need to know is how the mouth is actually structured, okay, and the different parts in the mouth and what they're called in Arabic. So the first thing we've got is the throat, okay, so this in Arabic is the halq. And the scholars divide the throat into three parts: the top of the throat, the middle of the throat, and the bottom of the throat. Then we have what is known as the oral cavity, i.e. the room within, or the space within your actual mouth, known as the jawf. Then we have the nasal cavity, so that's the air passage in your nose, and that's known as khayshum. Then we have the lips, and there are two lips obviously, and they're known as the shafatan. Then we have the tongue itself, which is known as the lisan. So now we're going to look at the structure of the mouth in terms of more its biological makeup. So we have the top of the throat, the middle of the throat, the bottom of the throat. We have the soft palate at the back of the throat, so that is the very soft bit of your throat, but it's the bit just before the dangly bit at the back of your throat, the very soft part just before that. We also have the hard palate of the mouth, and that's at the roof of your mouth. So after the soft part of your mouth, it becomes harder, and it's hard all the way up until the front teeth. So that's really indicated there is the middle of the hard palate. Then we have the more front of the hard palate, and that is the hard part of the roof of your mouth after the main curve at the middle of your mouth. We then have what are known as the gums, so that's really where the hard palate meets the front upper teeth. We have the same at the lower teeth, so where the lower teeth meet the hard part of your mouth at the bottom, i.e. the gums. Okay, so now we're going to go through the points of origination known as the Makhaarij, and we're going to group the letters up. So we've got 10 groups, and essentially the groups are either by letters that are made using the same organs in the mouth, or they originate in the same place as the mouth, and different scholars will group these up slightly differently. So the first set are the long vowels. So we have the fatha alif, and the diagram here is indicating that when you say the a sound, that the air moves all the way up the throat, through the mouth, and out through the lips. And if you say you'll notice your tongue goes almost completely flat all the way from the front to the back. We then have the kasra ya, and if you say E, it's the same thing again. The air flows all the way from the bottom of the throat out through the front of the mouth, except for the middle of the tongue becomes more raised. Okay, and with the E sound, it's the mouth movement or the jaw movement is vertical and slightly horizontal. With the Fatha Alif, it was almost completely vertical. And the last one is the Dhamma Wow, which is the oo sound, and the air again is passing all the way from the throat through the middle of the mouth out through the front of the mouth. The oo sound is made with the rounding of the lips, but at the same time the back of your tongue will raise. And it's very important that you come to feel and recognize exactly what is going on within your mouth. When you go into the science of tajweed, you will have to be able to control the movement of your tongue, your lips, your jaws, and this is where you get to the mastery of your tajweed. So we're going to start with group 2 now, which essentially are the letters which are made by using the lips. So the first one here is the Fa, and you'll notice we've put the Hamza with the Fatha and then the Fa, which is Sakin. So this is actually Af. Now the reason we're doing this, and we're going to do this with every letter, is that the scholars of Tajweed explain that in order to work out the mechanics of how the letter is said and to hear the letter clearly and properly, you precede the letter with the A sound. Okay, so you say Af, i.e. you make the letter Sakin, but they use the Hamza. So all of our examples are going to be done this way. So there's a small note here. It says like F in English, but the teeth slightly further down inside the lower lips. So the teeth are slightly lower down, as in they touch lower down the inside of your bottom lip, and that essentially allows a little bit more air to pass between the teeth and the lips. So normally in English you may say Af, but in Arabic it will be more like Af. Okay, so you just touch the upper incisors to the lower part of the inside of the bottom lip itself. Okay, and that's called the wet part of the lips. Okay, now in terms of the characteristics, we've got a few here, and this will be covered separately in the module which is purely dedicated to the Sifat, but I've got two highlighted here. So we've got the Hams, which is the continuation of the breath. So when you say Af, okay, there's at the end there's a f sound, a sort of more stronger release of breath, and that's normally known as the Hams. So that's called the continuation. Then we have the continuation of the sound itself. So when we say Af, Af, there's the sound of the Fa continues. It's not a sudden end to the sound. So these are two of the main characteristics of the Fa. Okay, the other characteristics are written there, and again we'll cover those in the lesson on Sifat. Now the Wow is here as Ow, Ow. So it says the complete joining of both lips, and it's not the middle part of the lips that are joining, it's the outer right and left part. So essentially you make a nice round circle. Now with this we have the stoppage of the breath and the continuation of the sound. So when we say ow, the breath stops, but the sound carries on for a slight more time. And you'll notice when you say ow, the back of the tongue raises up. Okay, one thing to be careful of, there are some Asian subcontinents where instead of saying wa, they say va, and that needs to be corrected. And essentially, when you say va, you're using the makhaarij of the fa instead of rounding the lips like the wa. Okay, and this is something your teacher will correct if you have that issue. The next is the ba. So here we have ab. Okay, and this is like the English letter B, And when you say ba, it's actually the dry parts of the lips that come together. Now, in terms of its characteristics, it's got a strong collision or a strong stoppage. So we say ab, ab. So when you stop on it, it's sharp and strong. And the other main thing here, we have what's called the echo. So in order to complete the sound, you have to release the two lips quickly and slightly. So you say ab. You can't say ab and then keep your lips together. You cannot complete the sound. And this is known as the qalqala, and we've got a whole lesson on this as well. Then we move on to meme. So we're still in group 2, and here we have am. And it's like the English letter M, so when you say ma, mi, mu, it's very much like the English letter. Okay, now it's pronounced by the meeting of the dry portions of the lips. However, the air also travels through the nasal passage. So when you say am, when you say it, just close your nostrils with your fingers and the sound will stop. And that indicates that actually the sound sometimes with the meme is coming from the nasal passage itself. And in terms of its characteristics then, it's again the stoppage of the breath itself. So the breath stops, but the sound is neither sharply stopped nor does it continue for a long time. So it's in between. Okay, so it's am. So we move into the next group, and we're going to the throat letters, and we start at the bottom of the throat. So we have here the letter Hamza. Now, this letter actually is a bit difficult because in English you have the sound but you don't have a letter to represent it, and the Hamza represents what is known as the glottal stop. It's an abrupt stopping of the airflow at the bottom of the throat. And if you were to say any English word which begins with a vowel and say it very slowly, you actually will hear this sound. So if you say 8, 8, you'll feel that your bottom of your throat closes very slightly for a very short time, and that's actually called the glottal stop, and in Arabic it's represented by the Hamza. So in terms of practicing this takes a bit of practice. This is a. So you have to try and close the bottom of the throat very abruptly. And then with the vowel sound, it would be a, e, u, a, e, u. And you have to get used to trying to just close off your air passage very slightly using the throat muscles. Now, in terms of its attributes or its characteristics, we have stoppage of the breath, and it's a strong stoppage. Okay. And again, you'll see this when you're practicing with your teacher. Then we have the letter ha, which some people call the soft ha, and it's very much like the English ha. However, with the ha in Arabic, there's a little bit more emphasis of the sound coming from what they say the chest. Although it originates from the throat, there's a sort of pulling of air from the chest. And if you say the English word hat, hat, it's a bit like that ha, hat, and you can feel your chest being used. And in terms of the characteristics, it's a continuation of the breath. Now, this is important when the ha is sakin. So here we have ah, ah. So what happens is, instead of just saying ah, you have to say ah, and you really try and bring it from the chest, although we have to be careful not to go ah, not overdo it, because the ha is a light sound and you just say ah, ah, without adding an extra at the end. That's a heavy sound, so we just want ah. Now when you say it when it's voweled, it will just be ha, he, hu. So we don't need to go ha, he, and very deep there. It's more, the deeper chesty sound is really more emphasized when the ha itself is sakin. Otherwise you can just relax and say the ha quite normally like you do in English, with a tiny bit more emphasis on the chest. Now the next one, we've called it the throaty ha, and it comes from the middle of the throat, and its closest equivalent in English is heart. So if you say heart, heart, you'll see there's a little bit of a squeeze in your throat. Now with the Arabic, the ha itself is produced by squeezing the muscles which are around your windpipe. So you constrict the windpipe to get this sound out. So if this was voweled, it'll be ha, ha, and this is literally done by squeezing the muscles around your windpipe. So we have ah, ah, and you'll notice it's different from the previous ha because it's not from the chest. The previous one was ah, ah, whereas this one is ah, ah, and we're squeezing the throat muscles. So this has a continuation of breath at the end, and it's a continuation of sound as well. Then we have what's known as the ayn. Now this is peculiar to the Arabic, and it has to be learned with the teacher, and it's produced by again squeezing the muscles in the throat, and it's a squeezing of the muscles is slightly, or rather the sound that comes out is a bit further back than the ha, the throaty ha. So here we have ah, ah, okay, and voweled it will normally be ah, hey, oh, and it just takes practice of squeezing the throat muscles, and some people find this very difficult initially, and it causes a lot of problems in tajweed. However, it's just a matter of practicing squeezing the throat muscles, and you can feel your Adam's apple moving or up and down a bit when you squeeze the throat. So again, this is ah, ah, ah. Then we have the ha. Now this is a sound that is quite peculiar to the Arabic language. However, in the Scottish language they have the word loch, loch, and that's the same sort of sound, and it's a letter that requires you to slightly constrict the throat. So here we have ach, ach, and it's a continuation of breath and a continuation of the sound ach, ach. So voweled it would be cha, chi, chu. So it's this sort of grinding sound, and it's effectively a continual exiting of the air, but you're constricting the windpipe at the same time. Then we come on to the ghain, ghain, and this is again peculiar to the Arabic language. However, you could liken the sound to gargling in English. So if you were to gargle, you go ha, and it's the raising of the back of the tongue touching the top of the back of the throat. However, it's just below the ha. Okay, so here we have ow, ow, and voweled it be ra, ri, ru. And the important thing here is try not to do the grinding. So don't go ow, ow, because then it sounds more like the ha. So we say ow, ow. And this is a stoppage of breath, so there's no sort of breath released at the end, but it's a slight continuation of the sound. So we'll have a look at group 4 now, and these are the letters where the back of the tongue is touching the soft palate at the back of the throat. So the kaf is pronounced slightly in front of the qaf, and it's very similar to the English letter K. And here we have ak. So when you stop on the kaf when it's sakin, you have a continuation of breath. So it's ak, very natural sound. You don't have to go ak and overemphasize that. And it's a light letter. It's a strong collision, as in if we say ak, ak, it's a sudden sort of collision and stoppage of the sound itself. Then we have the qaf, and this is the extreme back of the tongue touching the uvula. That's the dangly bit, most people call it, and it's all you have to do to get the sound of the qaf is to just move the tongue a bit back. So if you say kaf and then move the tongue back, you get the qaf. So if you say ka and move the tongue a bit back, you get the qa. So it doesn't actually require a lot of effort. So here we have the aq, aq, and this is one of the qalqala letters. It requires the releasing of the tongue from the back of the throat in order to complete the sound, and it's a stoppage of breath again. And this is known as a heavy letter because the back of the tongue actually raises and the air pressure is forced up vertically towards the top of the mouth. Okay, so just simply move the tongue back slightly from where you say the kaf and you'll get the qaf. Some people say qaf and that's too heavy. We just say qaf. Now we're moving on to the next group. So this is where the middle of the tongue raises and touches somewhere towards the hard palate in the middle of the roof of the mouth. So the ya is very much like the English ya, or y rather, and here we have a, and the middle of the tongue meets the middle area of the top of the mouth, and there's a stoppage of breath, i.e. there's no breath released at the end of the letter, but there's a continuation of the sound. So this is a. Slightly forward from that is the jeem, and this is very much like the English j, and we have a stoppage of the breath, i.e. there's no air released after it, but what we do have is a strong collision or stoppage, and this is an echo sound. So normally with the vowels it would be ja, ji, ju, but with the sakin it's aj, aj, aj. So it's a strong stoppage with the echo. Then we have the sheen, and this is produced again slightly further forward than the jeem. Now it's a bit like the sha in English, the sh sound, and this is very peculiar because the scholars will explain there's what's called the spreading of the sound. So when you say ash, ash, you'll feel the air sort of spreads on all sides of the tongue and forward through the front of the mouth, and there's a continuation of breath. So we say ash, you get that sh, ash, ash, the sudden sort of more pressure right at the end of the letter, and it's a continuation of sound as well. Moving on to group 6, so this is really where the front of the tongue is being used quite close towards the gums. Okay, so the front of the tongue presses against the area just before the gums. So this is not where the hard palate meets the teeth, it's just before, and this is equivalent to the English N, and we've got here an, and this is one where in some cases the sound goes into the nasal passage. So again, if you say an and hold the nose, the sound will stop, and this has a stoppage of breath, i.e. you don't release a sudden burst of air at the end, and it's between stoppage and continuation. So an. Now we get to the letter ra. Now we've got an entire lesson dedicated to the letter ra, but we'll go through the basics here. Now this is one of the more difficult letters to master. Now in English we have the R, but with the Arabic the ra is more harder, it's stiffer, it's more emphasized. Okay, so it's produced in two different ways depending on whether the ra is light or heavy, and there are about 15 rules to govern when the ra is light or heavy, and there's a lesson dedicated to this. So generally when the ra is heavy we say, so here we've got our, our. What happens is the bottom of the tip of your tongue touches the roof of your mouth towards the front of the mouth, and you're curling up the front of your tongue. And when it's light, here we've got il. Essentially, it's really the tip of the tongue, and it requires you to generally try and smile at the same time to get that effect, because what you need to do is get the back of the tongue down. So you say il. The other thing to note is that there is a slight vibration known as takrir when you say the ra. So when you say our, there's a tiny vibration, but what you're not allowed to do in tajweed is to overemphasize that. So you can't go our. That's too much, and your tajweed teacher will try to get you to stop that. And again, we'll cover that in a separate lesson, and this needs to be mastered with a teacher. The next one we've got is the dal. Okay, similar to the English letter D, but it's softer. Now, in English you say dad, and the tongue is slightly back from the front teeth. But when you say the da, the tip of the tongue is actually where the top of the teeth touch the gums, and it's a softer sound. Okay, the other thing to note is when sakin or voweled, this is not aspirated, so you don't let air out. So here we've got ad. Okay, and this is a qalqala letter as well, and there's no hams on this. So one of, for example, a very common one we say is middeen. So you have to try and stop any air coming out, as in a burst of air. So again, that's softer than the English D. The letter ta is like the English letter T. It's a little bit softer though. In English, when we say T, the tip of the tongue is slightly inside the mouth, away from the gums. Now in the Arabic, the ta is where, or is said by putting the tip of the tongue where the gums meet the teeth, and this gives a slightly softer sound than in English. It's a hams letter, so if we say at, we have the continuation of the breath, and you'll have the hams as well when it's voweled. So you have ta, ti, tu, but this will be less in the English. In English it will be ta, ti, tu. So the hams, or the aspiration, is slightly softer than in the English due to the positioning of the tongue. And it's a strong collision letter as well, so at, and that's the letter ta. Okay, then we have the ta. Now this is very similar to the ta, except for we call it emphatic. It's more pronounced, and essentially it's the heavy version of the ta. Okay, it has a stoppage of breath, i.e. there's no hams, and if we say alto, it's echo, and it's got near closure of the mouth. So they call these a closed letters, i.e. your mouth is almost closed internally when you do this, and it's heavy, which is covered. We'll cover the heavy and light letters in another lesson. So it's further back from the dal, so it's just slightly further back than where you pronounce the dal. So again, this is ato, and with vowels it's ta, ti, tu. Then we have the dhal. Now this is similar to the English th in the word that, and some of the countries in the Asian subcontinent, they do this wrong. They say this is za, and that's completely wrong. It's tha. So this is ad. Now it says here you do not let the air out. So this is one thing you have to be a bit careful of. There's a stoppage of breath. So instead of saying adh, you have to say adh or idh, adh. So when the dal is sakin, you must not have the th at the end. You can't say tadh. You say tadh, tadh. Okay, and this is something again that has to be practiced. It's a bit difficult, and it requires precision training. Then we have the tha. Now this is done the same as the dha. Sorry, I'm just going to pop back to the dha. The dal is done with the tongue between the upper and lower incisors. Okay, sorry, I forgot to mention that. When we get to the tha, it's the same, except the tha, the tongue is slightly further out. Okay, and the tha is as in the th in the word 30, and with this one there is a continuation of breath. So here we say ath, ath, and voweled it will be tha, thi, thu. Okay, so the tha, the tongue is, or the tip of the tongue is slightly more out of the teeth than the dha. And then the third letter in this group is the dha. Now this is like the dal, except for it's a heavy version of it, and there's a stoppage of breath. Okay, likewise, and this is also one of the letters where the mouth almost closes. So here we have al, al. Now this is actually very difficult to get correct when you first start, and essentially the tongue is, and this diagram is slightly not clear, is the tip of the tongue is, although it shows it here between the teeth, you have to get the tip of the tongue onto the inside of the upper teeth, so that it's the, if you put pressure it looks like the tongue's coming through, but it's not really coming through. So you basically move the tongue up onto the inside of the upper incisors, and what happens here is there's a complete stop of sound when it's sakin and the letter sounds heavy. So this would be al, al, and when you vowel it, it'll be la, li, lu. Okay, and this again takes practice. And again, in the Asian subcontinent, some people say this is like a zaz type sound, but it's not. It's very different. So you'll hear this in azim. Some people say azim, which is wrong. It's azim, and that heavy sound comes from moving the tip of the tongue slightly in onto the inside of the upper front teeth. So that was group 8, all to do with the tip of the tongue between or right at where the two incisors meet. Now we're moving down a bit, so the tip of the tongue touching where the gums meet the bottom of the bottom incisors, and this is the sin, which is a bit like the English S. Okay, there's a continuation of breath, and this has what we call a whistling sound. So here we say as, as. So there's a sort of whistling sound at the end, and voweled it be sa, si, su. Okay, so that's quite straightforward. Then we have the za. Some people call it the zay, and this is more like the English z. So this is as, as. So you have za, zi, zu, as, as. And again, it's got a whistling sound. And then we have what's known as the sad, sad. Now this is a bit difficult initially. The tongue is slightly further back than where the sin is at the bottom of the mouth. So you move the tip of the tongue slightly further back. So we say a sad. So it's really off of where the teeth are, slightly back onto the gums itself. And what happens is the back of the tongue raises, and here we have it written as aus, aus. And what happens, you have the near closure of the mouth, and there's continuation of the breath as well, and it's a heavy letter, plus we have the whistling. So it's as, as, and vowel it be sa, si, su. Then we're moving into group 10. Now this group, we've put the lam here. Now some people will put the lam in the same group as the ra and the noon. Now we've done it in group 10 because group 10 here is going to be about pressing the tongue against the upper top teeth rather than necessarily using the tip of the tongue itself. So I'm going to read this out. So it's like the English letter L, but it says here the entire front of the tongue presses against the upper front gums. Okay, so if we look at that image at the bottom with the blue squares, it's showing that's the pressure point. That's where when you say la, li, lu, or we say al, al. Okay, so the pressure is at the front around those upper top teeth. Okay, but it's got as well as the left side pressing on the left upper teeth. This is the same as in the words like or ball. So if you say like or ball, you'll notice that although you've got pressure at the front of the tongue, the left side of your tongue touches the upper left teeth. And this is very close to the next letter we're going to do, which is the dad. And you need to differentiate this, and we've got a picture of the tongue here, and it shows the area used to do the lam is really the left front part of the tongue. So really for the lam, although the tip of the tongue is touching the front upper hard palate, it's really the entire front of the tongue, and there's pressure on the left hand side as well. So this has got stoppage of breath. So when we say al, there's no burst of air at the end, and it's between stoppage and continuation, not completely stops and not carrying on too long. And we'll look at the dad now. Okay, so now this has no equivalent, and the Arabic language is known as the language of the dad because no other language has this. And this is like the dal, except for this is the emphatic version. However, to learn this, you start with the lam. So when you say al, al, the front left part of your tongue is pressing on the upper left teeth. And with the dad, what you have to do is take a part of the left side of your tongue further back and press that on the left side of the teeth towards the back of your mouth. There's still pressure, or sorry, contact at the front of your mouth with the tongue, but the pressure is actually much further back on the left hand side. Some people do this on the right, which you do the equivalent, but most people do it on the left. So if you try to say, if you try and say a D as in a da sound, but press the back left side of your tongue to the back upper left teeth. So you say dad, dad. Okay, and this takes a bit of practice, and there's a continuation of the sound, and this is one of the letters where the mouth almost closes, and it's a heavy letter. The back of the tongue will raise. So in the diagram they show what looks like the middle of the tongue touching the top of the mouth, but it's really the left side of the tongue they're trying to indicate. When it's sakin, this is very difficult as well. There's a complete stop, and it's not, you're not allowed to do the echo, the qalqala on this. So this will be alb, alb. So you literally just say the hamza and then push the tongue onto the left side of the mouth. And when it's voweled, it will be da, di, du. And this takes a lot of practice. And it's one of the ones that your teacher will help you with when you're practicing in your tajweed class. Okay, and that covers the Makhaarij and the Sifaat of the letters. But one thing to be aware, this is theory, and when you're going through your tajweed and mastering your surahs with a teacher, this will be a long-term part of your training. So this is something that you have to keep practicing again and again and again, especially with things like the length of the echoes, the hams, or i.e. letting a bit of air out at the end or not, making your ta and your da lighter than in English, doing your bod correctly, and not making your qaf too heavy, etc. And this is something which comes from imitating the teacher, and you will have to readjust your tongue and literally memorize where you put your tongue, the amount of pressure you're using, how long you keep your tongue in certain places, etc. It takes a lot of practice, but this